Welcome to the CTAA October member webinar, which is powered by our partners at TripSpark. I'm L'Oreal Lance, your membership director, and we're so excited to have you join us as we discuss the steps that systems may need to take as they reimagine their transit systems in a post-COVID world. As a reminder, this meeting is hosted by Zoom in meeting style format. All of you were muted upon entry and videos have been turned off. Please type any questions that you may have in the chat box. If your question would be best shared verbally, please let us know in the chat box that you'd like to speak and we'll have you on mute. Now let's get started. To kick us off, I'd like to introduce CTAA's Executive Director, Scott Brogren.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. And I really appreciate the chance to kind of set the stage for this session. And I'd like to thank our partners at TripSpark. And L'Oreal mentioned kind of powered by, and I think so much of our business, and certainly the membership that CTAA has, are powered by partnerships. Whether it's at the local level, with vendors, with your customers. Partnerships are at the foundation here. And I was thinking about the title of this session, Reimagining Your Transit System. And this was something that we were talking about before there was a COVID-19. Many of us in the transit business and many of you were looking at ways to reimagine your services with an eye towards how do I continue to be relevant? How do I be most efficient? And a big piece of that always is, how do I use technology? What's the right technology? We were doing all that prior to there being a COVID. Well, now we're in a post-COVID world. And what we're really looking at is, what is the impact of this global pandemic? And how much of that is temporary and how much of that is permanent? And I think that's a really important way to be framing up your analysis of this reimagining of your services, is to try to understand that there are things you're doing as a transit provider, as a leader, as an advocate. There are things you're doing now because we are in the midst of this pandemic. When we get to the quote unquote new normal, there's going to be, I think, a more of a settling, and some pieces of what you're doing now will become permanent. And differentiating between those two is going to be critical. And that's where it takes tools. And that's what technology is in all of this, is it's a tool. CTAA, our tools, besides Zoom and all this, what we really think is the essence of who we are, is the strength of our members and the leaders within those systems, and the way they approach their operations, and these kinds of sessions where our best and top professionals, and that's really who you have here today as part of the two panels, folks representing the very best of rural and small city, and even some mid-sized city transit systems. These folks are the best resource we have, and to allow them to discuss what they're doing in conjunction with so many of you out there listening and participating is the best content that we can provide. And we're so thankful that we can partner with TripSpark to deliver this. The last thing I'll say is, the folks speaking today represent, as I said, high quality CTA members, but many of you out there are just as high quality. And I like to talk, when I'm talking to membership groups, to say, engage with us. The best you can get, the best value for your membership in our association happens when you engage with our staff, when you engage with me, and everything else that we're doing. So if you want to be more active, great. If you're kind of on this session and you're not a CTA member, we'd love to have you. For those of you, the vast majority who are CTA members, I and L'Oreal, our membership director, don't get to say it often enough, but thanks for being a member. And now I have The joy of turning the session over to my good friend, Paul Comfort. Paul and I go back, I'll estimate at least a quarter of a century, and could be longer, but you're in good hands with Paul, and I'll be hanging around too, because I want to learn from what our members are doing. So I'll turn it back to you, Paul.
Thanks, Scott. All right. Well, good day, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you. We have about 100 people online right now, and I'm excited to help lead this conversation today about public transit. As Scott mentioned, we've known each other for quite a while. I've been involved in public transportation for over 30 years now, starting out running a member agency of CTAA, the Queen Anne's County Transportation Department. I was our county's first transportation director and started our public transit system. And I'm proud to say in 1991, I received CTAA System of the Year Award. Where our Queen Anne's County was recognized as the best community transit system in America. We're very proud of that. And that actually was the beginning of the rest of my career. Winning that award for our transit agency brought me to the attention of companies that ended up hiring me. One of them was called Mayflower, which became Laidlaw, which now is part of First Transit. And my career took off from there. And I spent the next 30 years, actually probably the next 27 years or so, working around America and now the world, working with transit agencies to improve what they're doing. Right now, I'm vice president of Trapeze and TripSpark, software companies that power transit agencies around the world. In addition, I have the opportunity to host a global podcast called Transit Unplugged, where the world's leading transit industry podcast heard in 99 countries. We're just finishing up an Australian series tomorrow with a new episode with Magda Robertson, who is CEO of a transit system in Australia. This included, started out with Andy Byford as our first guest of this series. Andy was an Australian executive and then went to Canada and then went to New York, as you know, and now is in London. I actually just talked to Andy yesterday, and they are looking for a big bailout from their government, just like we are looking for here in the US, in London, at Transport for London. But then we went to another couple places, including Sydney, Australia there. Right after this, we're doing a series with transit CEOs from Africa. I've already interviewed one from Lagos, Nigeria, Abimbola. She leads a system that serves 21 million people in that city in Nigeria. Nigeria has 200 million people, by the way. Amazing. And Lagos has 21 million of them. And so they're actually in the process of building out light rail, bus rapid transit, subways, bus networks, all this amazing stuff. So I get to talk to all these folks around the world. That's the reason I'm telling you a little bit longer about this. And I can bring you some of that, what I'm hearing from around the world. What are the best practices? What are people doing now to future-proof their transit agency? How are they reimagining their public transit service? I also was honored to be able to put out a book, this one right over my shoulder, earlier this year, called The Future of Public Transportation. Scott was a co-author of that book, including 40 top transit executives from around the world who wrote about what the future of public transportation would look like. Amazingly, you know, we published this on March 1st, and within 2 weeks, COVID hit. And so, you know, the world kind of got turned upside down. But you know what? The truths in that book from these 40 co-authors still hold true, actually even more so than ever. Like our emphasis on microtransit and some other things we talked about in the book have now really come to the forefront. And I'm thrilled to tell you a little bit about my new children's book. It's a picture book for kids. There's nothing else like it on the market. I spent 6 months looking for something that I could show my grandkids. Hey, this is what they call me, Giggy. This is what Giggy does for a living. There's nothing like it. I mean, there's a few books with 1 or 2 pictures of buses, but they're all monster trucks and zoo animals and all that. So I did a book. I went and researched and found out kind of what the history of public transit was in the Western world and around the world, and got an illustrator from India. I crowdsourced it through LinkedIn. Does anybody want to draw my book? I ended up with this guy, and it's turned out to be a #1 bestseller this month in October on Amazon. And it's now, we've just published it in Spanish. This week I published it in Portuguese. Next week it'll be in Hindi in India. And then I think the week after that we'll have the Chinese translation done. And so we're trying to get this book in the hands of as many children as possible right now, because of the fact that public transportation has really been under the gun. Scott and I were just talking about this a minute ago. You know, ridership levels around the world are still low. I just reviewed UITP numbers yesterday on ridership statistics from major cities around the world. And most transit systems are between 50 and 70% ridership, but the commuter services are much lower still. And the subways are all around 40 to 50%. People seem to be afraid to go underground still. Public bus service is at 50 to 60% in a lot of cities. And in the downtown areas of some of the major cities in the world, it's touching between 60 and 70 in many areas. Places like New Zealand, I had a staff meeting with some of the folks in Auckland, New Zealand last week. They asked me to do the same presentation I'm doing for you. They're up to over 70% now back in ridership. New Zealand's really done well. But here in the US, we need to think about how are we reinventing ourselves? And so that's what we want to talk about today. I'm going to share with you a presentation. Let me know, Scott, is it up there full on the screen? Can you see everything? Okay, good. So, all right, now we'll just see if we can get it to move ahead. There we go. So as you recall, as coming into 2019, we were doing great. Public transit was. Finally, we had turned the corner on ridership numbers. Now, I know that's not the only number that counts. I'm actually a big proponent of the fact of we need to share with our stakeholders that ridership is not the only statistic that counts. You know, it's a lot of other things, how many people are getting to jobs and how we're helping folks who have no other access and the economic development story. But to be honest with you, I mean, I'm a former elected office holder as well as a county commissioner. And I know that most of the folks that are sitting in those key seats that fund us, they still look at ridership as their key metric that they look at. And ridership was finally on the upturn after folks had figured out what to do to increase ridership, you know, which is to reboot your bus network, to add in frequency, and to reduce friction, anything that slows the vehicle down. So that's onboard fare payment, adding in bus-only lanes, transit signal priority, anything you can do to speed it up. Those were the three silver bullets, I call them, that really helped transit systems see an increase in ridership. But coming into this year, we had this COVID-19 lockdown where the government shut down our economy and people aren't going into their offices anymore. And so we saw this dramatic ridership reduction, 50 to 95%, with a higher number being on the commuter services, commuter trains like the MARC train service that I used to run, or Long Island Railroad and BART. I mean, just decimated. And commuter bus service as well. I used to run 350 buses, take people into Washington, D.C. and into Baltimore. And they closed some of them because like nobody was riding, literally like nobody was riding the service. And so this ridership reduction has dramatically impacted, obviously, our fare collection because we reduced the routes. We went to rear door boarding. As a result of that, the fare box wasn't at the back door. And so fares were waived at a lot of systems. So we had a reduction not only in the regular revenue from ridership, but also waiving fares for a lot of systems. The costs were up, cleaning costs were ramped up. And in addition, a lot of our cities that funded us through sales tax, the sales tax in a lot of cities went down dramatically, and that has impacted a lot of our transit systems. And so, as we mentioned earlier in the call, some of you may have heard us talking about the CARES Act funding and how it looks like we may have to wait till after the election day to get any more money. But this one-time bump of money was the single largest infusion of cash from the federal government into transit systems in the history of the U.S. It represented about 280% of the FY 2020 allocation. Now, how have we responded? So I've started actually a separate podcast just to deal with this called Comfort's Corner, and now it's been folded into the Transit Unplugged rubric. But I was doing a daily show talking with transit leaders around the world about what are you doing about COVID back in March and April, and now it's a weekly show. But here's some of the ideas that people have had to mitigate that, right? Obviously, health kiosks. You can see that at the bottom right-hand corner. There's an example of one at Metrolinx in Toronto where you could get your temperature taken, get your cell phone cleaned, or lots of different things they're doing at health kiosks. Dividers between the seats. You can see up top, there's a picture there that shows that example. Seating at reduced capacity. Many transit systems are still at this reduced capacity, as is some airlines, like Southwest Airlines has said they're going to continue having the middle seat empty through the end of November. A lot of transit systems have done similarly. They've tried to do offsetting seats. As a result of that, they've tried to provide real-time information for their passengers, meaning you can look at your phone and see if the bus is full. I don't really know personally how much use that is, though, unless you have some historical context. Because if the bus is full coming to your bus stop, 6 people might get off at your bus stop. But if you saw that and decided not to walk downstairs and get on the bus, you missed your slot. So some transit systems are actually showing that additional information on those apps. I was just talking to David Gerstle, the chief digital officer at MBTA in Boston, about this. Then, of course, people are doing all kinds of new things. Ultraviolet light on vehicles was tried at MTA. Now MTA in New York is trying something new, which is a mister type service, which will mist the vehicles with special chemicals, which was just in, if you haven't read about that, read Mass Transit Magazine from yesterday. They had a headline about it. Really interesting stuff. I talk about it on my podcast tomorrow too, that could actually kill, viruses and things like that. So very interesting. Microtransit, as I mentioned, has really become a key in a lot of cities. For example, I'll give you a quick example. So Scott works in Washington, D.C., and I live near Washington, D.C., and we have a great guy now that's in charge of the transit system there named Paul Wiedefeld. Paul used to be the head of BWI Airport when I was head of MTA, and we were good friends through that. We're both modal administrators in Maryland. He's done a great job of trying to improve their service. But during the COVID-19 pandemic, the height of it, obviously they needed to reduce service and some hours of service to match the demand of passengers. And so some of the routes were cut off at 9 p.m. And the city of Washington, D.C. realized that that was really going to impact some of the, what they call their frontline or essential workers at like Howard University Hospital and some other hospitals. And they would ride the bus to work in the overnight shift, and they didn't have a way to get there. So the city of Washington, D.C. contracted with VIA, who is a company that provides microtransit. And they gave these workers at the hospital a special app where they could push a button that would triangulate their location. They could walk out, stand at the right spot on the curb, and a VIA vehicle would come by and pick them up and take them to the hospital. So, and the other members of their shift and other workers at other hospitals in the area. So the concept of microtransit has really become essential. And as some folks are making changes to their routes now coming out of COVID, as ridership picks up, and they've made some additional routes, maybe making them high frequency. Other routes, they're not still seeing an increase in ridership. So microtransit has become a solution to kind of plug in where you don't have enough ridership to make a certain fixed route work. And then of course, mass on board is another big thing folks have done. Now, let's talk about ways people are future-proofing their transit system. I just wrote a blog post last month. It's on Trapeze Group's website if you want to read more about it, but I'll tell you about it right now in the next 5 or 10 minutes. These are the top 10 ways that I'm seeing agencies, what I call future-proof their transit system. The first is zero-emission buses. Electric, CNG, hydrogen are the main zero-emission fuels that are being used. And the idea here is that this was happening obviously beforehand. California had mandated this, by a certain upcoming year, and other cities had made policy decisions to move towards zero-emission buses. But really what I'm talking about here is we've kind of lost the high moral ground to being the clean alternative public transit has because of COVID, because uninformed politicians stood up on TV and said, unclean, unclean, you're a petri dish for germs. And, since then, and I try to post all this stuff on LinkedIn. If you don't follow me, I encourage you to. I put up stuff every day. And CTAA does the same thing. They put out great posts. But there's been study after study after study that has shown that there's really no link between riding transit and getting COVID any more than anywhere else, in the grocery store or anywhere else you're at. As a matter of fact, they're finding out that most of the police spaces are getting it is at parties at your home where people, aren't keeping social distancing, et cetera. And so anyway, in order to regain that high moral ground, my suggestion is that we refocus on clean fuels, zero emission buses. And we can once again say we are the clean alternative. We're cleaning the environment, right? From Los Angeles to Beijing, people finally saw the skyline during COVID because they weren't crammed with cars. We need to say, hey, we can keep you seeing your skyline. Get on the bus. We are the clean alternative. What do you think, Scott? I see you nodding your head.
I like that phrase. We can keep you seeing your skyline. And I think that's what we're all looking for right now is pieces of this that we can bring forward to have those kinds of discussions. So
Good. And then the other one is new tech tools, right? So a lot of folks just went to their Saturday only schedule or their Sunday only schedule, which is even reduced. Saturday might be a 50%, Sunday might be a 35%. But other folks were trying to pick and choose which routes to change and modify based on ridership trends immediately after COVID. People didn't really have the right back office scenario tools, software-wise. I work for software companies and work with them all the time. And I know there are tons of tools available for folks. So a way to future-proof your agency, meaning you'll be better ready in the future if this happens again, is to make sure you have the right tools to be able to do scenario planning, rerouting service, adjusting rosters and shifts quickly and seamlessly. Most of us in mid-size agencies or larger have unions that represent our drivers. And so there are collective bargaining agreements with work rules in them. And those work rules need to be respected if you change your routes. And if you're doing this kind of on the fly, a lot of times you have to have your labor relations folks then go through that afterwards with a fine-tooth comb and make sure you haven't violated any of the work rules. But there is software programs and technology tools where you can upload your collective bargaining agreement into the software, and it tracks every change you make and it doesn't give you the option to do things that will violate those rules. So again, we need to not be caught flat-footed again if something like this happens again. The third is high frequency routes. I heard somebody say this last year, actually. There's 3 ways to increase ridership. Frequency, frequency, frequency. Kind of like people always say with real estate, it's location, location, location. So again, I'm encouraging folks to really look at high frequency routes. I just had a conversation with the CEO of a transit system in Hampton Roads, Virginia, William down there. And he just got, amazingly, funding from the state of Virginia in the middle of the crisis, $20 million of new dedicated funding. So we can learn a lesson from him. He's on the podcast too this week. William Harrell is his name, good friend of mine. But he's going to use that money to go high frequency routes, because this is what people want. They want low touch, right? They don't want to have to touch a paper schedule anymore. You don't want to have to print paper schedules anymore if you don't have to. You go online, you still have to track it. But if you have this bus coming every 10 to 15 minutes like clockwork during your peak periods, people don't even need a schedule. They stand there like it's a subway train. And to do that, though, you need to move from time point management to headway management. And again, you need to have the right tools in place to be able to allow you to do that. The fourth way we can future-proof your system is to have software in place that will allow you to track all your assets, people that are, your cleaning, your maintenance and tracking of the assets, and your vehicles. I can't tell you how surprised I was. Late November last year, I was in Canada at a major transit system. And I've probably visited 70 transit systems in the last 2 years, maybe more than anybody else alive, actually. Because of my podcast, I actually was doing the interviews on site. And so I visited transit systems all over Canada, all over America, like 40 in the US, maybe 10 in Canada, and then 20 overseas. And there's a big garage. They had like maybe 300 vehicles in this garage. And I looked up on the wall in the dispatch office, and there it was, a piece of paper that had the lot of the parking lot with numbers on it. And then a utility personnel had evidently walked the lot a few hours before and had written down, bus 211 is here, bus 678 is there. And they had all the handwritten numbers on this map of their parking lot. And I said to them, are you kidding me? This is 2019, folks. This isn't 1987 when I started. That's what we used to do in 1987. Now you've got to be able to track where your vehicles are at all time, especially in the age of COVID, where people are bringing back paratransit vehicles to the yard in between each passenger to clean them down, all the different things that are happening. To future-proof your agency, you need to have these tools in place. A fifth one is contactless ferrying, right? So TfL led the way. We were talking about Andy Byford earlier. I was able to visit TfL, Transport for London, maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I was still CEO of MTA in Baltimore, and got to meet with Shashi Verma, who was their chief technology officer. And Shashi had just moved to contactless ferrying, which are the credit cards. That's a tap and go, MasterCard, Visa. It's not even the multi-use card like the Charm card or the Oyster card, but it's this basically moving away from a system that you have to maintain personally as head of a transit agency with accounts and all that stuff, and letting MasterCard and Visa do it for you. So they went to contactless ferrying, and within 6 months, 40% of the millions of people that rode the tube and the bus service in London had transferred over to using that as their main way to ride transit. And it would automatically do fare capping so that you didn't pay more than you would have paid if you had bought one of their Oyster cards or whatever. It's a great way to future-proof your transit system if you can, which is to move toward these validators on your vehicles, right? One of the long-term implications of the coronavirus pandemic, in my opinion, is what I call the death of the fare box. I wrote an article a few months ago for Metro Magazine about this, and a lot of agencies were moving away from fare boxes anyway, but this really has signaled the death blow of fare boxes, I think. Over the next 10 years, we're going to see less and less people using the actual fare boxes. They may still use simple boxes for cash collection if people are going to do that. They're going to be moving to these validator systems, contactless cards, wearables, where they have bracelets and necklaces that have a chip in them, or your phone that has it on there. Any kind of contactless ferrying. Moving to this low-touch environment is a way for transit to future-proof itself. And then real-time passenger info. We've already talked about this, but allowing people to see, is the vehicle full? And also real-time information in the sense of how often is this vehicle being cleaned? You remember when we used to be able to go into restaurants? Wasn't that fun? I mean, we can still do it a little bit now. But remember when you go into the bathroom of a restaurant and you'd see the sign in the back of the door and it would say, this bathroom was cleaned by, Johnny at 2 p.m. This bathroom is cleaned by, Kumar at 3 p.m. And they would initial it. And you felt confident, hey, this bathroom just got cleaned. That's good. We need to do the same type of thing when it comes to transit by providing real-time information to our passengers about how often we're cleaning these vehicles. Some folks have even suggested, like Alea Carey, who I work with in my podcast, she suggested the theater of the clean, where you have your cleaners do something which would have been unheard of before, right? Anathema. Allow somebody to come on the bus while there's passengers on board, wiping down the stanchions, showing them the theater, not the theater of the absurd, but the theater of the clean, showing them that we are getting this stuff done. And some folks have moved to have at the end of the line, they'll have a cleaning crew there to wipe down the vehicle, the high touch surfaces in between. Just an idea. Microtransit. Again, we've mentioned this, but microtransit is CODA just announced in Columbus, Ohio, a big thing they're doing here. So microtransit is a key. Online trip booking is another big one, right? What do I mean by that? So online trip booking is allowing people to not have to call into your call center to book their paratransit trip. I used to run in Washington, D.C., a call center for WMATA for the paratransit system. And I had 60 reservationists in there sitting right next to each other, right? Can't do that during COVID. And you probably won't be able to do it going forward if another situation like this occurs. Ridership has gone down. You don't need as many people in there. Some people have even allowed their reservations to take calls at home. But another way to really help promote not having to have so many people sitting together, it could save you money in the long run too on staffing costs, is to get software in place to allow people to book their trip on their phone or book it on their laptop, right? So it gives them more control. It also reduces the need for you to have people sitting around taking calls. And finally, the last two ways, obviously autonomous vehicles are being used in all kinds of interesting ways. Nat Ford, the CEO of Jacksonville Transit, showed us this year that he used his autonomous vehicles without a safety driver on board, probably for the first time in the US, to transport COVID-19 test samples from a drive-through test site to the Mayo Clinic down in Jacksonville, Florida. And so they're being used for all kinds of ways. And people are still finding out what is the right niche for them to be used. It's a great way to obviously go to a low-touch environment and future-proof your agency. And then finally, mobility as a service. This is when you aggregate all the mobility services in your city on one smartphone app, which passengers can plan, pay for, and maybe even in the future, like they do in Helsinki, Finland, subscribe to all mobility services. So what's the concept here, right? So Dallas did it right, if you ask me. Dallas is the first big city in America that went to their own app, and they didn't let Uber or Lyft do it for them. They brought Uber and Lyft with them and put them on the app along with everything else, the bikes, the scooters, all the transit options, rental cars, all that kind of stuff on one thing. You can plan your trip. I want to go from my house downtown. Okay, it'll give you the fastest way or the cheapest way. And you can decide, okay, have a Lyft pick me up at my house, take me to the train, take the train downtown, get off the train, ride a bike the last 3 blocks to my office, or I can walk. And you can pay for it with one push of a button, and it pays everybody behind the scenes. And you just have your little squiggly line on your phone. You got to show them when you get there, your UPC symbol or whatever. So this is big. It's happening in mid-sized systems, not just big city systems. Even mid-sized systems are looking to this as a great way to help future-proof your transit system. So these are the top 10 ways to future-proof your transit service. As I mentioned, got this new book. If you get a chance, if you want to find out more about the things I'm talking about, you can visit the Future Public Transportation website that I run, or listen to our podcast. You can subscribe. We have a new episode every week. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. It's fun. And then if you want to have me speak to your staff, that's something I've been doing over the last 6 months. It's been fun. I don't have to come to your office. I can just sit here right here in my home office and give us a presentation just like this to your staff. I've done it all over America. I'm doing it in St. Louis next week with their transit system. They're asking me to speak there. I've done it, everywhere. So come in, drop in for a 20-minute presentation and some Q&A. Spice up your boring Zoom meetings by having somebody like me come in. Scott might do it for you too, but I definitely would do it. And I just find it fun to talk to people about what you're doing. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, etc. So that's it for this. Thank you so much. Let's see. Were there any big questions that popped up, L'Oreal, that you want to mention to me before we start with the panel?
I haven't seen anything just yet.
All right, perfect. So now we'll go into our panel. We've got a great group with us and that are going to be talking about just what I talked about. And I've got some pretty good questions to ask them too. Pat Hale, Assistant Director at Athens in Clark County Transit. We were able to visit there. Scott had us all down there for the Sun Transit Conference last year, and I got to visit Athens with Butch. Had a great time down there. Actually had Butch on the podcast. And then Brooke Ramsey, the Business Development Manager for the Heart of Iowa Regional Transit Agency in Urbandale, Iowa. And Alex Clifford, who's CEO and General Manager of Santa Cruz Metropolitan Transit District in Santa Cruz, California. Let's welcome them all with a silent welcome on our Zoom call here. And they can pop on screen when you're ready, L'Oreal.
We
All right.
have everyone ready to go.
All right, I got him. Great. So let me go through the group first off and just ask you to do a brief introduction of yourself, and then we're going to get into the heart of these questions. Pat, could you introduce yourself?
I'm Pat Hale with Athens Clarke County Transit. I've been here for almost 34 years now. You want me to tell you a little bit about Say that again.
You started when you were 5?
Yes, of course. And do you want me to go ahead and tell you a little bit about our system, or I'll tell you that I started out as a bus operator, and I started when the rubber meets the road. So I was a bus operator, a Lyft driver, a route supervisor. So I kind of know a lot about transit.
That's awesome. We can't wait to get into the questions with you. Brooke.
Hi, I'm Brooke Ramsey with HERDA. I've been here, 10 years already. How did that happen? I've done a little bit of everything at HERDA right now. I do business development, which I jokingly say, if you don't know who does it, that means it's me. Was our operations manager for about 5 years until kind of changing focus on helping HERDA kind of streamline our operations and look at expanding the business into other forms of service delivery. So excited to be here today.
Thank you. And Alex.
Hey, Alex Clifford here at Santa Cruz Metro. We're about an hour on a good day south of San Francisco. We operate about 98 fixed route buses, about 43 paracrews, what we call paracrews, paratransit, directly operate everything. And pre-COVID, about 5 million trips a year, about a $50 million budget.
Very good. Well, why don't we just start there? Thanks for giving us that kind of thumbnail sketch of your service. So, Alex, tell us about what happened with COVID and how did you respond to it?
Right. So we started planning for COVID way back in about January, started investigating disinfectant products. So we started gearing up to get ready. We took a page out of the past, 2005, 2009, you know, the swine flu and the avian flu times. So we just resurrected some things that we learned there and started implementing it here so that we were ready to go. We were disinfecting before the first case hit this county. Soon thereafter, obviously, ridership plummeted. I'm looking at a graph right now. At our low in the beginning of April, we hit about 7,000 trips per week. We should have been at 121,000 trips per week at that time. We're recovering a little bit. We're now at about 18,000 trips per week, but we still should be at about 148,000 trips per week. We did, as a part of that plummet, we did pull back and implemented weekend service, basically cut our service in half. That was also necessitated by the fact that we are a university town. 60% of our ridership is from UCSC, and they were all immediately sent home, no more in-person classes. So 60% of our ridership vaporized overnight. We have slowly come back. We've started to put service back in place. We're trying to get to pre-COVID levels with the exception of the university service because we want the service to be there when people are ready to come back to work. So we don't want, as you know, in transit, we can't react all that fast with bids and union issues and things like that. So we wanted to put the service back, even though it's too much service for right now, but it's ready for people as they come back. And that's sort of the state we're in. We went through all the other gyrations everybody else did, rear door boarding, no fares. And then in June, we started collecting fares again and had people board through the front door.
Have you gone back to, you're collecting fares and all that now?
Yeah, we started back in June collecting fares, and we tied that to operator safety. We wanted to retrofit our entire fleet with the clear protective curtain, the shield, because we didn't have driver compartment barriers. So as soon as we completed that, we went back to collecting fares.
It makes sense. Yeah. It's a shame we have to go to that, because I know a lot of, especially, mid-sized city systems, the drivers get used to the same passengers every day and they become friends with them, and having that connection kind of severed by this plastic shield is a shame, but I guess it's something we have to go to. How about you, Brooke? Tell us about what's happened in your agency since COVID, how you've responded.
Well, I think, Paul, honestly, it's been a lot of the things you discussed. I think you did a really great job at introducing kind of what we've all experienced, and HERDA serving mostly rural communities and surrounding the Des Moines metro. We've been lucky that our communities have been affected less than the Des Moines metro has been, just because the population is lower. We haven't had the outbreaks. But like everybody else, we still had to take the same precautions to keep our drivers safe. So, at first they were concerned when we put the barriers, the temporary barriers in. Now we've started that they've developed an actual plexiglass hinged barrier that can be a permanent fixture in the vehicles. We've started transitioning those over, and the drivers are getting more comfortable with them, and the passengers are getting, more used to that. But we've started charging fares again. We lifted the fare free back in July because we felt that we had things safe enough for the drivers to be able to do it, and our office staff as well. But just like everybody else, I mean, at one point we had gone from 1,100 trips a day down to the 100. And if we even completed that many, we were lucky. We were seeing upwards of 20% of every trip canceled or no show the same day. And now we're getting close to about 300 trips a day. So it's really slow. But we're still making it work. We're still getting people to healthcare. We're still getting people to employment. Still getting people to education, which is an important factor in the community.
That's good. And you do a lot of like demand response, right?
Yeah, our service has historically been demand response. We've been around since 1981, so HERDA is getting close to their 40-year mark. And we were doing some things, just kind of what you touched on earlier. We were all looking at what do we do. Our communities have drastically changed in the last 39 years. So are we going to continue to deliver services the same way we always have? Or are we going to diversify that? And those were conversations we were having in 2019. So just like Alex was saying, we were really looking at things early on before COVID started, and when COVID was starting to come around, we were looking at policies and pandemic, procedures and what were we going to do. So now kind of behind the scenes, what the community isn't necessarily seeing is how are we going to come back? What's that going to look like? Because we want to take the changes we planned for at the end of 2019 and use those as we come back, hopefully before 2021, but I just don't think that'll happen. So just kind of looking at changing a lot of that.
That's good. We'll talk more about it in just a moment. Pat, how about you all?
Well, we are carrying around 3,500 passengers a day right now. And, but we did have like a 6% drop in ridership. We've done a lot of the things that you mentioned. I saw you actually touched on everything that I could probably say about real boardings. And I kind of feel like it's redundant because I'm like, okay, he's already said this, but we did a lot of the stuff that you've done. One of the things that, and I won't go there yet until you get to that question, but I would like to talk about our pandemic plan that we put in place that really helped us a lot. I know Alex hit on here just a little bit. So
why don't we do that? I mean, you're a college town too, folks. I think know that about Athens, but that actually was my next question. So why don't you just lead right into it? Everybody has a continuity of operations plan, and Alex drew on theirs from some of that before, but tell us about what you all have done.
Well, one thing that really helped us to plan ahead was we got started early too. So like Alex did, we started as soon as we heard about it. We just kind of dusted it off because it was from it was the influenza plan. We had it some time ago. So we just went back, dusted it off and revamped it for the COVID. So there was a big help. One of the things that I would say to everybody that we ran into was getting people, because the information that was coming out, everybody wasn't taking COVID seriously. So when we started saying, okay, what do you need to work at home? They really weren't thinking about, if I had to work at home, what will it take? And where will I work at home? Do I have the right working space? Because some people don't really have an office at home or a place they can set up a monitor. What do I really need? Do I have internet? That type of things. A lot of people really, you'd be surprised that don't have internet. So those are some things that were some of the pitfalls that we ran into was people said, yes, I can work. We said, yeah, this person can work from home. We figured out who needed to come into the office, which was those main people when the drivers were still providing service, and dispatchers. Some of the dispatchers where they embraced it, they say, oh, I can work home. The idea sounded good working from home, but they didn't really think about okay, even when you ask the question, what do you need? It just didn't quite hit home. So we wound up having to jump through a few hoops to get everything that people needed to work from home. So even with the plan, that was the issue for us. So I would say to everybody, please make sure you really get them to understand, hey, what do you need? Where it helped us most was the maintenance department knew. They were like, okay, well, what are you going to do? We're going to do phase one. Phase one, we're going to go to, I'll cut the night service. Phase two, we're going to go to Saturday service only. Phase three. So we did it in phases. So that really helped them to plan. So all we had to do was Bush would send out an email saying, okay, we're going to phase two. And we went to phase two. They knew exactly what we're going to run. The word went out to the public. Everybody was on point. We didn't get all the phone calls from drivers or staff saying, what am I supposed to do? Because there was a plan. Who do I call? Who do I contact? The managers knew. I mean, that thing just worked. If you got that tool in place and you get it in the right hands in time, it's awesome.
That's good. Alex or Brooke, do either of you want to talk about your, continuity of operations plans and any changes you've made?
Because of HRDA's unique, our service areas, the 7 counties that surround the Des Moines Metro, we've always had a challenge in having kind of this hole in the center of our service area. And it's a large geographical area with, tons of distance in between one community to the next. So we've always had a unique setup with remote offices, and it gave us really a leg up on the way that we were able to react, because as HRDA grew and adapted technology, we kept this remote working in mind, not necessarily because of the pandemic, but as a plan for an emergency response and just our regular operations. So we were really fortunate that when the decision was made to go ahead and have people start working from home, I had them leaving within a half an hour of that decision. We had people packing up and taking their equipment home, taking their phone home, and really being able to work that way. And I can't stress enough how, when I hear people talk about the cost of hosting our scheduling software online versus having that sitting on a server in your building, how integral that is if you were to experience a tornado or a flood or a hurricane or a pandemic. That is something that the cost, you just can't quantify that if there's a disaster. And in our situation, I think that's really what made our lives easier from an operations standpoint. Is there was nothing we had to do. That part was ready to go. And as we all know, your software for your routes or your paratransit program, that in itself is what the majority of your employees work in all day long, and it's how they do their job. So I'd say if you get your pandemic plan in place, but also make sure that your technology is ready.
Thank you. Alex?
Yeah, so we took a little bit different approach. We're just now updating our COOP and sort of looking forward from here. But we chose not to waste a lot of time on this in a fast-moving environment trying to react to COVID since March. So our sort of COOP or COOP updates since March have really been dynamic. And what I mean by that is we immediately instituted daily meetings, 1 to 2 hour meetings with the entire management team, so that we could talk about what's happening, what happened yesterday, what's going to happen tomorrow, and work in a dynamic environment. So that's how we chose to handle it. It's worked out very well for us. We are working on the document right now for what we think is going to happen in the future.
Tell us about how, Alex, we'll just stick with you for a minute. How did you make substantial changes to your service kind of on the fly, as they say, building the airplane while you're flying it?
Right. Well, I mean, obviously there's some things you can do and some things that are difficult. The union gets stuck on these quarterly bids, right? Oh, you got to do everything on a quarterly bid. So I invoked a state of emergency, and I said, hey, sorry, I'm not going to wait for the quarterly bid. We can be partners in this, or I can do it and you can fight me later on down the line and grieve and go through all your processes that the union go through. And so they got on board. And within a couple of days, when we really needed to cut service in half, within a couple of days, we reinstituted a new bid in which everybody was divided into an A and B schedule. So remember, we had cut service virtually in half. So all the A operators worked for 2 weeks on every day, and the B operators stayed at home with full pay. And then at the end of 2 weeks, they flipped, and the other group went home for 2 weeks. And we did that all the way through the summer bid in June. So that helped us to react to an overabundance of operators and not have to lay them off or furlough them. But more importantly, we reduced by about half their potential exposure to COVID on the bus.
That's good. Pat, how about you? How did
Well,
how did you make these
one of the
changes
things
apply?
I'm sorry, one of the things we've updated, I'm sorry, I was looking at the question, sorry about that. One of the things that we've updated is with the COOP was that we realized that number one, we had to make sure of exactly who was able to work at home and what worked for them and what didn't work. So we looked at the things that worked and we looked at the things that didn't work. And those are the only issues that we really had. As far as the phases that worked really well, everything fell right into place. It was just more of a, like Brooke said a minute ago, it was more the technology. So, and making sure that we asked the right questions.
That's good. The theme of this is reimagining your transit system. So I guess a big summary question: have you reimagined your transit system, and what is the new imagination? What are you changing going forward coming out of COVID? Brooke?
I would say for the most part, all of the safety protocols that we've put in place, with the exception of wearing masks, are something we can plan to continue. It's a good practice. It can't hurt anyone. I think, we've been doing this for 7 months now or 8 months now, and everyone is used to it. And I just see that as a positive continued change. As far as our service delivery, kind of going back to what I said earlier, we had already actually brought in CTAA last year and worked with them on determining what service delivery mode makes most sense for HRDA and in each of our communities, because we have, so many cities and so many counties and unincorporated areas that they're very different demographically, geographical layouts. It's just very, very different. And so we're actually looking to move into a microtransit platform in the more densely populated areas. And by dense, I mean, 20,000 people. So not your Athens, but, looking at getting something that gives people more flexibility, giving them more options, having some route service that they can kind of know what to expect, making it more user-friendly for people who are visiting the communities. Some of the smaller college towns, I think that would bring more inclusion, and I think it would help the colleges also appeal more to their international student base, because when you live in another country like China, for example, the public transit system is very different than door-to-door transportation. So it's time for us to kind of refresh what we're doing and move forward, and again go back to that technology to help us make it happen.
I had a question come in, Brooke, and I thought you might be a right person to ask it to start with. What about contact tracing? Are you trying that, or is anybody trying that with if somebody's tested positive on your buses?
We've done that manually through our software program. We've had people who ride, for example, we had a dialysis rider. He went to dialysis, they took his temperature, he had a fever, they took him over from the clinic to the hospital, had him go through some questions, decided he needed to be tested. So we went ahead and did the contact tracing while we waited for the test results. Luckily, every scenario that we've had, or every time we've been told, the rider has tested negative. And I would say we're fortunate that we haven't had any drivers test positive because of rider exposure. We've had them, go out and have some type of family gathering on their personal time, and then later get tested and test positive. But we've been very, very fortunate. We know many other transit systems have not been so lucky.
How about you, Pat? Are you doing contact tracing any, or have you? No, you didn't have to.
We haven't had to. We haven't had any exposures here.
That's good.
All of them. If we did have some that thought they were exposed, but they were negative. So
Yeah. And how about like reimagining your system?
Well,
Coming out of this, what are you going to do differently?
Well, one of the things we've already started is that's different, and we're going to continue to do is I feel like Brooke, COVID taught us a lot, and that is how important it is to wash, just basically washing your hands. We have hand sanitizer installed on all our buses now. We're also using the foggers at our bus stops. So we have a online tool that they're using in the maintenance department. So they're keeping track of every time that bus stop was cleaned. We also have people that we still have people because we reduce service, and they're actually, as you said earlier, wiping our buses at the end of the line. We're planning to continue to do that because, like you say, there's nothing wrong with that. The best tool, I think, I really thought this was really a great idea, was at the bus stops, because nobody thought about that. But think about it. Who stands in your bus stops? I mean, there's nowhere to wash your hands. So now
Right.
we have them tracking, clean those bus stops and maintaining them at the end of the line. Then they're wiping down the multimodal center. They're still using that bleach concentrated, and then they're sort of breaking it down just a little bit to mop and do the floors. So we're going to continue to do that because everything's changed.
Yeah, that's right. Alex, how about you?
Sure, let me do this. If Taylor will let me share, I'll just share 2 quick slides. How about that?
Okay.
There you go.
So Taylor, there you go. Okay. So first of all, can you see that? I have all the answers, right? And if you believe that, my nose is growing. So here's what it looks like for us. We've broken it down into 3 phases. One is to restore public and customer confidence in a safe experience when riding the bus. And there's a whole host of things behind this bullet that go into that. That's the here and now. That's what we're doing right now. We have capacity. We're trying to get people back on the bus. We want them to feel safe. Phase 2, added value, all kinds of things, touchless, Wi-Fi on buses, new apps, next bus, all that stuff. Phase 2, right now in the works, going to be coming online in the next couple of months. And then the toughest one, number 3, which is the new normal. There's all kinds of things associated with the new normal. I'll just show you a quick slide of what we think that might look like. We're looking at on-demand service. We're trying to restore service as much as financially feasible, increasing frequency, using AVL and APCs, rethinking our role, the role and functionality and layout of transit centers, the future of ticket vending machines, paper, coin, and bus on shoulder is something we're working on. So that's what we think for now, what the new normal is beginning to look like for us.
That's great. Anything else that in our wrap up question, anything else you want to share with the audience about coming out of COVID and things you've learned, or anything you want to share in general? Pat, we'll start with you.
Well, we had already started going fare free. So we continue to go fare free. We were at that point when we actually went totally fare free during COVID. Our commissioners had already started doing that in phases, and we haven't gone back to accepting fare at this point. So that's one way to protect our drivers, of course, but of course it worked into the plan anyway. So that's one of the things that's becoming, as Alex said, I like your wording, the new normal. This might be the new normal, no more collecting fares and locking people up in a vault room where they're counting that money, where they could be, think about it, So we're dealing with COVID. It looks like it may be here to stay. I mean, I think that's just the reality of it. So it is going to become the new normal, Thank you, Alex.
Yep. Brooke, anything else you want to share before we wrap up this segment?
I think, making sure to communicate and doing that, not only with your staff, not only with your writers, but with your stakeholders and your community partners. We've took some time to revamp our website and our social media planning. And, we actually went out and did a video. Paul, I think you talked about the cleaning solutions and early on when we first kind of did intro. And we actually went out and did a video and posted that on our website and started a campaign of Ride Safe, Ride HRDA, and it's really a health and safety plan. So that's all posted on our website where anybody can see, and we do refreshers and varied up some blog posts and things like that. So I think communicating is really important to help people understand it's safe, because you're right. Some initial guidelines from the CDC and other places talking about the cleanliness of public transit, and even to what Alex said, to rebuild that trust. So just make sure that communication is there.
That's good. Alex, bring us home.
Three S's: share, share, and share. You know, we have to use these forums, CTAA, APTA, our state forums. We have to share. We can't go it alone. You know, each of us are out there trying different things. We've got to share our successes, share our failures, and we can all learn from that. And that's what I've been doing. You know, you all have taught me a lot. I've implemented a lot of things here as a result of what has been going on in these forums. So keep sharing.
That's excellent. Thank you. And thank you, Patricia Hale, Brooke Ramsey, Alex Clifford, for sharing with us some of what you've learned during this COVID and how we can all help reimagine our transit system in a post-COVID world.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Great. And now we're going to have TripSpark, who is helping make this whole thing possible, share with you what they're working on to help us prepare our systems for a post-COVID world.
Hi, Paul. Thank you. Hope everyone can hear me.
Yeah.
Good. Excellent. All right. Well, I'm very excited to be speaking to everyone here today, and what a great discussion with the panel. My name is Sebastian Vedas. I am the head of product development at TripSpark. And with the team that I lead at TripSpark, we really are very much focused on working closely with all the transit agencies to create solutions that provide the best level of service and experience to the riders. But at the same time, you know, allowing the transit agencies to operate in the most efficient way possible. And COVID has certainly generated a lot of disruption in transit, but I also feel that it also accelerated some of the industry trends that we had seen or we were tracking even before COVID. And you know, Paul and the panel have already touched on a number of these points, and I know that Brooke and Pat and Alex had we're just talking about how important that information sharing is to the riders with either to like maybe displays or mobile apps that we offer. We talked about on-demand transit as well, and a number of other solutions that actually TripSpark currently offers as well. What I wanted to focus on for today, however, is a little bit more around the mobility on demand aspect, and the fact that it's, you know, it's really not just a buzzword, but it really is becoming the necessity to offer more flexible and equitable service to the riders. And there are a number of ways in which TripSpark can support transit agencies in this area. And what we wanted to show today is more of the rider perspective of one application, mobile app that we have available, and which allows agencies to get closer to that mobility on demand vision, that on-demand transportation that we've been talking about. And I'd like to pass it over to Tanya. Tanya is the senior product manager that has worked on this product, and she'll say a few words about the solution, and we'd like to give you guys a quick demo to show you what you know, this mobile app looks in the hands of the riders. Tanya?
Hi there. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So first of all, thank you for having us and giving us this opportunity. So what you're actually seeing is my tablet. So it's running on my desk and connected. So what this is our new Rides on Demand app. And what we've done is we've designed it to work with our existing Novus and Pass demand response products. So the benefit there is agencies that have those products already. It's simple as setting up some configuration settings, and really it's just a new means of booking a trip in Novus and Pass. So along with our passenger portal, or, you know, riders calling the agency directly. So, and then whatever equipment is on the vehicles integrated with Novus or Pass, you know, they're taking the trips that come through this app as well. So as you can see, it's kind of geolocated me. You can see I'm at work in Calgary here. It's very good about sort of letting riders know where the service area is. What you're seeing here is all the stops that we brought in for the Calgary area. So, and as a side note, although we didn't have this app ready at the time when COVID hit. One of our customers, Lethbridge Transit, who have Novus, called us up and asked, can we sort of do this, rides on demand type concept? And with Novus, using what we have existing. So we imported their fixed route bus stops, and we were able to do that. So I'm just going to sort of book a trip here, show you how easy it is. So again, I can sort of interact with the map. It's easy to sort of see where stops are close to me. So say I wanted to pick a stop there. I'm going to say I want to be picked up at that location. And, it tells me about how far away. It's about a 2-minute walk. But say I, want to search for a location. So I can search for a stop number. I can search for a point of interest or an address. So I'm going to go to Chinook Mall. So you can see it's pulling up the bus stops as well as the Chinook Center. It's kind of showing me what the path is. I'll be walking there. And say I'm taking my teenage daughter with me, because every teenage daughter likes to take mom shopping. So I can add my daughter in there. We can use the space settings that are sort of part of the Novus and Pass software. So we could sort of say, wheelchair space, if you're using buses with bike racks. So say you could have 2 bike racks available. So it will search, the search engine will search for the appropriate vehicle to accommodate the ride. And then I just sort of do a find a ride. So this is a demo. So when you see the times, we've sort of speeded things up a bit, but estimated pickup time 2 minutes. It gives you a cost, a summary of your ride, and then it's as simple as confirming. So now sort of just like the TNCs, it's sort of telling you to be prepared to pick up, where to meet your driver. You can see the bus moving along the map there. So it also is integrated with the native sort of maps within the mobile devices. So if I want to open up and get detailed walking direction using Apple Maps or Google Maps, I can do that. So one thing I wanted to point out is right now, our initial release is supporting those sort of on-demand stop-to-stop trips. We've started with stop to stop because a lot of agencies, especially during COVID, are sort of replacing some of their fixed route service at certain times or certain areas with on-demand service. So they want to sort of have the riders congregate and make more streamlined runs. So, but very quickly following on our roadmap is being able to support door-to-door, being able to schedule rides ahead. And what's possible today, which is really a powerful functionality, is you can commingle your rides. So you could have a passenger that's an ADA passenger book through the agency. They've got their ride, where they're guaranteed, and then you could fill in empty capacity by just letting people book on demand rides. So also works with our passenger portal. So I'm gonna leave it there, and welcome to answer any questions.
So Tanya and I will be available throughout the break as well if anyone wants to ask any questions. We'll just stay on and be more than happy to dive deeper into the app or answer any other questions related to it.
Thanks, Sebastian. So we're going to take a break right now, and also thank you, Tanya. That was a great presentation. We're going to take a break right now. Go get a bite to eat or take a bathroom break or whatever, and let's come back. And in 6 minutes at 2:40 p.m. Eastern, we'll return with a second panel, our final panel of the day, on reimagining your transit system in a post-COVID world. The guests will be Tim Bates, Transit Coordinator for Corvallis Transit in Oregon, Jill Drury, Transit Manager for Charlevoix County Transit in Boyne City, Michigan, Heather Domelin, CEO and General Manager of Mountain Line Transit in Flagstaff, Arizona, and Miguel Velasquez, Chief Operating Officer of Regional Transit Service in Rochester, New York. Let's see you here in 5 to 6 minutes. Thank you. Tanya, if you want to stop sharing your screen, then we'll have the other main thing come up there. Or actually leave it on. This is good. If you want to leave it on, that's fine. if you want to show people. And Tanya and Sebastian will be here to answer any questions. So I'm going to take a break, but ask them questions for the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, and we'll just monitor the chat window there.
Tanya and Sebastian, this is Scott. I just wanted to say thanks. Much appreciate your partnership on all this, and glad to see a good group of our folks benefiting from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Scott. Thanks for having us. And I know you and I have been talking about it. This is the app that we had in mind when you and I were chatting about how we envision mobility on demand and how what sort of shape and form that was going to take in the future. And future is now.
Sure is. One of the things I've been talking to a lot of our members about recently is, and I think it's like, what do they envision their role as we get to the distribution of the vaccine? Mm-hmm. Particularly in an on-demand place where our systems kind of know where lots of at-risk seniors, people with disabilities, people who are really mobility challenged, but who are really going to need to get in when the vaccine is widely available and get it early on. Mm-hmm. And I'm really curious about that. But just something to kind of put in I always like chatting with you because you're always thinking about different ways to kind of apply this mm-hmm. stuff. I think that's going to be an important one for us. And I also see we got a question came in from one of our members in North Carolina, Randy Hume. When you mix ADA demand response with general on demand, how do you report that to the FTA and NTD?
So basically it utilizes all our existing reporting functionality. So you just create a different service type within the back office software and select that option when reporting.
Yeah, and you're right about the fact that, certainly the system would allow to commingle and, share the vehicles in not just at different times in space, but commingle passengers on the same trip. But you're still able to separate and understand exactly where the requests for those rides that come from and what passengers you have on the vehicle.
That makes sense. That is a complication that we constantly hear from our membership. What Randy was saying, about how to make sure anything that makes their lives easier when it comes to NTD reporting is always something they're looking for. Yeah.
Data is king.
It is, Tanya, and that's the piece that we're trying to do through that national center that we've got on applied transit technologies, trying to get some of the smaller agencies to understand the value of that data and I think in the post-COVID-19 world, the ability to really, if you're doing fixed route, know where your ridership is really massing in real time, and so you can deploy assets, and it's all going to be based on your interpretation of the data you're looking at.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of cases they understand, the power of the data and the need for the data. It's just the barriers that they face or, the time it takes to pull that data. I've talked to many transit agencies where they say, they got a full-time person just taking driver logs and hand bombing them into spreadsheets and, just to get that minimum data required. Let alone being able to use it to improve performance and make informed decisions.
Yeah, and it's personnel too, isn't it? Like getting somebody who's comfortable looking at, interpreting, visualizing data in ways that wasn't a skill set that the transit systems, when I started 30 years ago, ever envisioned needing. Yeah.
Good. For those who are online, if you want to find out more about Rides on Demand, Rizwan has just put up a link to that, the microtransit app, and you can click on that and find out more information. You can also go to TripSpark's website for all kinds of great information. We shot a video last year before the shutdown at Toronto's Union Station and talking about the future of public transportation. It's a fun video. And I encourage you to go and visit their website and find out more about this app and also all the services that TripSpark has to provide. Thank you so much, Sebastian and Tanya, for being with us and sharing with us and help empower this the special partnership with CTAA today.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Yep, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our second panel. Thanks for those of you who have stayed with us. We're still up to, we're close to 90 people online. Thank you for being with us. We're going to go into our reimagining your transit system in the post-COVID world with our speakers, Tim Bates, Jill Drury, Heather Domelin, and Miguel Velasquez. Thank you so much for being with us, folks. And let me have them come right up on screen. They're up there. That's great. And we're going to kick off our second panel. And we'll do it by asking each of you to maybe give me a brief introduction of yourself. We'll start with Miguel, and what your role is and a little about your transit agency. Miguel?
Sure. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me here. Very excited. Seems like a great group of people getting together this afternoon for us here in Rochester. My name is Miguel Velasquez. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Regional Transit Service in Rochester, New York. I'm completing my 21st year here with the agency through a number of different roles. So it's been a great experience for me. We are about a $50 million customers, a year or transportation service. We have about 220 vehicles, fixed route vehicles, another 50 or so paratransit vehicles. About 400 drivers for both the paratransit and the fixed route system. We have served about 55 routes, and we do nearly 2,300 trips a day. A good portion, well, I shouldn't say a good portion, but about 200 or so of those trips are related to the school district here in Rochester, New York. So as you could imagine, and I say this now, as we talk further later into what we're doing with schools not going back here in Rochester to in-person classes, we have a good number of operators available and vehicles available that we have used to partner with different entities in our community. So with that, Paul, I'll leave it there for now.
All righty, thank you. I recognize the room you're in. I remember being there with Bill and going into that room. Jill, how you doing? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your agency.
Hi, thank you, Paul. I'm Jill Drury. I'm the director here at Charlevoix County Transit in Boyne City, Michigan. We're in the northwest corner of the lower peninsula. We're a rural area, all demand response. Our normal residency here is about 26,000 people. However, during the summer months and during our ski season, we see quite an increase in people in our area. Like I said, we're all demand response. We have 20 vehicles. We service a small island out in the middle of Lake Michigan with 2 vehicles out on that island. And I have been involved in transit for almost 30 years between Newaygo County, which is in West Michigan, and now here at Charlevoix County.
Great. All right, Tim.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Tim Bates. I'm the transit coordinator for Corvallis Transit System, which is located in Corvallis, Oregon. We are a fareless system, which in this day and age, we were happy to already be fareless, so as not have to implement that during COVID. We've been fareless since 2011, and we are a small urban. Corvallis is about 58,000 people, home to Oregon State University. We have 25 drivers, 2 driver supervisors. We do contract out our operations service, but fortunately, the contractor are here on our site, as is the bus parking and our maintenance. So that has made a big difference. We went to that 3 years ago, and we're very fortunate that that's happened.
Very good. Heather?
I'm Heather Domlin. I'm the general manager for Mountain Transit in Northern Arizona. We are a small urban. We have about 70,000 people in our community, plus one university adding about 20,000 more during different times of the year. We do directly operate both bus and paratransit services. We have about 100 employees total. 50% of them are our operator team. We have 37 vehicles in our fleet. We operate 9 regular routes, achieving about 20-minute frequency on some routes. And then in 2019, we had 2.5 million rides, and we finished 2020 with 2.1 million rides. The university makes up about 50% of our ridership.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Well, great group representing lots of different cities and angles. I can't wait to kind of dig in over the next 40 minutes or so into your response to COVID and what we can learn and how we can recover. So I want to kick it off with Miguel. Miguel, could you talk to us about your agency's response to the COVID crisis, service or fare changes, cleaning, sanitation, PPE, et cetera? And then if you're open to it, I think folks would, we've seen Rochester, New York on the news a little bit lately with some of the unrest that was up there. So if you want to comment on any of that, I think that'd be interesting for folks as well.
Sure. So I think we've been following what most other agencies have been doing in response to COVID. We had a period where we suspended collecting fares. We only had rear door boarding to keep the operator safe. We blocked the first few rows of the bus. We actually, for a number of years now, we've had already barriers or screens installed in our entire fleet. However, our operators, understandably so, those barriers, the purpose was to protect them from assaults, not from a virus. And so we've been going through a number of iterations on how to modify those barriers so that it protects the operators more than what it does today. So we're still struggling with that one a little bit. We've come with a couple of prototypes, and again, not the perfect solution yet. Of course, like I said, we went fareless from March until middle of July, and then at that point, when we went back to fares, we just happened to be in the middle of going live with a mobile ticketing fare. So we were able to do touchless fare as soon as we started reinstated fares again in the middle of July. So that's been obviously very welcome by the customers, great acceptance and great market penetration at this point. We did midday, we're doing, I should say, midday sanitation and cleaning on the buses. So unintended consequences on our latest employee survey. Employees now are super excited about the cleanliness, operators themselves about the cleanliness of the bus. So I think, again, limiting the number of people on the bus for social distancing and things of that nature. Nothing, again, too dissimilar from what other agencies are doing, including, testing UV lights and air filtration systems, things that we're going through at this point. You mentioned the unrest in Rochester. Yeah, it's very unfortunate, what's going on in Rochester and around the country in many places as well. But, we have great partners here with the city, the county. For the first time in one of the protests or one of the days, for the first time, at least since I've been here, I want to say now 30, 40 years, we actually shut down the system completely from a Saturday to a Sunday. So we stopped service. Unfortunately, we also kind of scrambled around so that we would finish our paratransit service early that day, so accommodating our customers, our paratransit customers. What it did do for us is, in us now looking at our emergency response. How do we respond to emergencies? How we change our service? How we provide customers a service during those times and take customers safely to where they need to go. So it's something that we actually forced us to do an update of our emergency planning, and something we have obviously shutting down services, nothing we had contemplated before. So that's something that, again, it's unfortunate, but something that has come out of that experience.
That's good. Very good. Thank you, Miguel. Appreciate that. Jill, how about you? Tell us about how your agency responded to COVID.
Thanks, Paul. We responded early on. In Michigan, our first state of emergency was issued on Tuesday, March 10th. And so we knew right away that we were going to have challenges ahead of us as services within our cities and in our communities started to shut down. Because there was talk right away, the schools are going to end up shutting down. You know, we're going to see changes in restaurants. You know, we all saw it coming. So by the next week on March 16th, all of the schools were closed. So 6 days after the state of emergency was issued. And that made a huge change for us in the service we provide. We do a lot of demand response for school children because we have in Michigan a program where they don't have to attend school in the school district that they live. They can do school of choice. And so there's a lot of families that choose to send their kids to schools in other communities or to charter schools in other communities. And of course, those schools are not providing transportation for students who live outside of their district. So families rely on us for the school transportation. So that was a big hit right away. As we started to see businesses and workshop programs close, we took, you know, a hit again. So by the end of that that week of March 16th, we had made considerable changes to our programming already. We immediately reduced our fares down to free fares. For everything across the board. It didn't matter if it was inside the county or if it was a medical appointment that we were transporting regionally outside of our county. Everything at that point was a free ride. We reduced some of our services because at that point, we were already seeing a reduction in calls. We were getting those cancellations. So we made slight changes to our hours right away for our weekday hours and discontinued our Saturday day service and our Friday and Saturday night service right away because the restaurants were closed. And so we didn't have visitors coming into town and going into the restaurants and such. So early on in March, we took a proactive approach and a very flexible approach that we were going to need to roll with the punches and sort of learn our lessons as we went along. You know, obviously it's not something we'd been through before. So we were fortunate that we were able to work with our county emergency department to be able to source PPE. So we didn't have a difficult time in sourcing PPE for the employees. However, for a lot of people in the area, COVID wasn't really taken seriously right away. Back in March, April, even May and June for the most part. I remember at the expo sessions that we did back June 8th and 9th, I think it was 9th and 10th, somewhere in there. I had mentioned that was one of the things that we were seeing here in rural northern Michigan, that people still weren't really taking masking seriously or the threat of COVID seriously because we had only had 12 positives in our whole county. Now, as of yesterday, we have 123. So it's still not a huge number compared to metropolitan areas, but we are seeing more and more cases in our area. We did, like I said, we did free fares. We rolled that back here in September and began collecting fares again. However, we're not using our paper passes anymore. We've encouraged folks to use an online wallet so that they can log into the web portal program, fund their accounts, or they can call into our office and fund their accounts, so that we have touchless fare program for them to be able to use. We're seeing more folks use that than what they had in the past, but we are still seeing a lot of cash. Our service is not coming back real fast. But this time last year, we were up over 6,700 rides for the month of October. At this point, looking at our numbers, I project we're going to be roughly about 2,800 for the month of October. At our lowest point, which was in the month of May, we did a total of 1,500 rides. And that wasn't even really all rides. A lot of that was deliveries, because we quickly partnered with our Commission on Aging in March to be able to provide the senior meals for the Commission on Aging. As the county started laying people off because we had stay-at-home orders and such, they came to us and asked us to partner with them to do meal delivery, which kept a handful of our people working, kept the volunteers that would typically, or the part-time staff at the Commission on Aging who typically would be driving county agency vehicles and doing those deliveries, kept them safe. I believe through June, from the end of March through June, we delivered over 8,000 meals.
That's great.
So,
We'll
yeah.
talk a little bit more about that later when we talk about the partnerships that some of you have been able to do. And thank you, Jill. Tim, why don't you tell us about your response there?
Sure. So like I mentioned earlier, we were already fareless, which was great for us. We didn't have to do any changes there. It was easy to implement all backdoor boarding, which we still have. And then as far as cleaning, we're doing the same deep cleaning that at night that I'm sure everybody is doing some form of. And the other thing we're doing is having somebody down at our transit center all day long, every day, and they're jumping on the buses, cleaning, getting the high touch surfaces, and then jumping right off. And that has been just wildly popular with the ridership. It just gives us a sense of confidence that something is being done. And whereas ironically, we had some people at first saying, boy, that smell on the bus is just a bit much. And we just don't hear that anymore, because I think people now associate that with the buses being clean. So that was a really good idea. And I think it was something we got off of an earlier CTAA forum. And so that has been really successful. As far as the service level, we are garnered a lot by what happens at the university. The university is almost now entirely doing online, but we weren't sure how that was going to translate at the beginning of the school year. So we did implement our entire full service when the university started. As we saw trends after the first week, 2 weeks, we realized we didn't have to do peak service at our high intensity college routes and our night service, which we have a 6-hour night service Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We are going to cut that back to 3, because just the bars, restaurants close at 10 o'clock, even grocery stores. So we just don't see the need to do that.
Okay.
Paul, can I jump in with a question?
Yes.
So we had a question that I think a few did answer. What methods have those moving to mobile ticketing used to ensure that unbanked or underbanked riders could still ride? Have any totally eliminated cash and coin fares on buses? And I know Miguel shared that in Rochester, they're still accepting cash and self-fare media, including store value cards. And Heather said that they're looking into this option as well as they move forward, an option for unbanked customers. But I was just wondering if anyone else had anything else to share.
If I could just add, our customers are also able, for those who are unbanked, they're able to download the mobile app and put cash in their account, or put money, I'm sorry, in their account using cash through a TVM. So that's another way we were able to help the unbanked use the mobile app.
That's great. Anyone else?
Yeah, we allow folks to drop cash into the fare box if they want to fund their accounts that way. And then we insert that information on the backside of our program to be able to show that that account has been funded. We've also set a little bit higher threshold on our accounts right now. So if for some reason somebody does go in the hole, we give them some extra time to catch that back up, where we normally wouldn't allow somebody who was with no cash in their account or no money in their account to be able to ride. We've changed that threshold during this period of time.
Very good. Heather, want to tell us about your responses to COVID there?
Sure. So I won't repeat what everyone else has already said. We did many of those same things. We did reduce our service levels. Part of that is our university went on spring break and never came back. And so we knew that that made up 50% of our ridership. We also have a community college here that did the same. And so did our K through 12 schools. So we did reduce back to what we call our weekend schedule. So that's 60-minute frequency. But outside of that, we really did a lot of what everyone else did. We also did a communication campaign that was very important to us. I think Miguel talked about the presence and being there, cleaning the vehicles and restoring rider confidence. We've used communication to do the same. So it's been messaging bonanza about if you're sick, stay home, essential trips, and things along that line. We do have an electrostatic sprayer that we use in our vehicles every night for disinfecting, in addition to the cleaning that we're doing at our connection center, as are many others. We returned to regular service in August. So we had about 5 months where we had reduced service. We went back to full service in anticipation of some of the university, the community college and the schools going back. Unfortunately, most of them are still running hybrid options. So we are seeing our ridership right at about 50% of normal. We have not returned to fare collection. We actually go back to fare collection tomorrow. And the delay in that has been putting in a barrier for our operators. We did not have one. So we built one, our mechanical staff looked at different things that are in the marketplace and created one that fit our vehicles and our needs. And those were all installed, and we put them into use tomorrow morning for our riders. So
that's great. So I wanted to ask you, one of the interesting things, positive, I look for the silver lining, out of any of these things. And I think a silver lining has been for transit agencies working with COVID is our interaction with other agencies in the community. Miguel, I know I talked to Bill about this there in Rochester early on. He was on the podcast, and he told me about how you guys were doing weekly calls with all these agencies in your county and city and really helping each other. Can you tell us about that? And is there anything you would do differently?
Yeah, so we happen to have in Rochester one of the highest poverty rates in the nation. And so there's been a huge initiative lately by a number of different community-based organizations to address that issue. So just before COVID, a number of organizations, non-for-profits, CBOs, under the umbrella of the United Way had gone together to address this issue. And then COVID hit, and they kind of changed directions. Just how can we help the community? We already have all these community-based organizations, including ourselves, at the table. So what can we do to help the community through this crisis? So as I mentioned earlier, with our school district being such a significant part of our business, and students or school being canceled and students not going back to school, we had a number of available resources that we could use to help the community. Plus, we looked at our values and our mission, right? Part of our mission is that we partner with the communities we serve to provide safe and sustainable mobility. One of our values is engagement and collaboration. And so we look to our values and our mission, and we really put that to work. And so, again, through the United Way and this number of organizations, we did some of what was mentioned already. We started doing deliveries of PPE to other organizations. We actually started doing procurement for smaller transportation companies in the area who just didn't have the manpower or the ability to do procurement of PPE. So we started ordering PPE for other smaller transportation companies in our area. There was a big concern at first of having an outbreak of a different virus because parents were not taking their kids to doctors' wellness visits and having their shots. So we started providing basically on-demand service, if you will, for families who needed to take their kids to wellness visits. We did, again, I think it was mentioned before, we partnered with FoodLink, and we did a pretty cool, we went to different neighborhoods, and we did kind of an ice cream truck kind of thing, but it was meals. We were delivering meals. We had, speakers with music, and kids would just come over and grab a lunchbox, and we distributed, I believe it was close to 8,000 as well here in Rochester. And just a very quick kind of fun story out of that is they dedicated, through the summer work program, they dedicated a student to each one of these buses to help with the distribution of food. And it just created this amazing connection between the driver and these students, and the drivers became kind of a mentor to these students. Just, things as simple as, hey, you got to show up every day on time. And, it was a great experience for the drivers as well to go through that. So we've done a number of things. One of the cool things that we're doing now is we met with both the Republican and the Democratic Board of Elections, and we're helping them. How do we get people to the polls to voting during early voting days and on election day? Because not a lot, but a number of polling sites have been closed. So now people may not be able to get to the polling sites. So that's something we're working through right now. How do we get folks to make sure they get out and vote? So a number of things, again, using our available resources to be able to partner with our community.
That's great. Jill, how about you? You'd mentioned some work you'd done with the Commission on Aging. Have you had other interactions with community groups, and has it brought you together? And what kind of things do you think you could do in the future?
Yeah, we strengthened the relationship that we have with Commission on Aging. We've always had a good relationship with them. For a number of years now, Commission on Aging has paid for any seniors ride for rides that were within the county. Didn't matter what the trip type was. If they were a senior in our county, Commission on Aging covered the cost of that fare. And then earlier this year, just about the time COVID hit, we had implemented a program with them to cover the cost of out-of-county transportation for medical appointments for the seniors. So that actually strengthened that relationship as COVID was hitting. And people, while a lot of appointments got canceled for a while, we're actually seeing a resurgence of medical transportation. If anything of our numbers is increasing, it's medical. So that partnership that we've put together with Commission on Aging is really benefiting, some of the most vulnerable and frail people of our communities. So that's been a great partnership that we've had, like I said, in place for quite a few years. I mentioned the meal delivery. It worked out really well for us to do the meal delivery for them. They were doing disaster meals. So we were delivering in each one of our communities once a week, frozen meals to the households. And then later on, once the Commission on Aging was starting to bring some of their staff back, they were doing hot meals. And so it was one hot meal on the day of delivery and then frozen meals for the rest of the week. COA has taken back the majority of that now that all of offices and such are back open. However, they still had a need for some help. So we've actually repurposed some of our staff because at this point, we don't need 4 dispatchers. Phone calls just aren't coming in the way they had been. So instead of having 2 of our dispatchers permanently laid off, they've been reassigned to other agencies within our county, and then a 3rd dispatcher is actually doing a little bit of work here in the office and then doing some work for the Commission on Aging. So just another way our county departments have worked together to get through the pandemic. Another interesting, I don't know if it's interesting, but one of our other big partnerships is with the food pantry here in Boyne City. We actually have 4 food pantries in the county. Boyne City's pantry has been the most active with us. And we did delivery of food boxes to folks anytime that they needed them. And while people can pick those up curbside, a lot of individuals who are getting those boxes are still calling us to do deliveries. The other thing that we did was we tried to partner to be able to do grocery deliveries. And that proved to be a little bit more difficult because the grocery stores in our area only use an app to be able to place the orders. We found that a lot of our seniors either didn't have the technology, didn't understand the technology. So that one was a little bit more difficult, but from that, we've learned some lessons, and we're actually now working on a new project with the Commission on Aging where we will actually be helping individuals who need assistance to get groceries if they're not comfortable going into the grocery stores and doing their shopping yet. With flu season coming and these second waves coming, we are going to have a person that'll be dedicated to a phone line a couple days a week where people can call and give them the grocery list. We'll use the store app to input that order, and then our driver will go pick up that order and deliver it. So it was something that we really saw a need for, and nobody else was doing it. We partnered with a church for a little while. We did referrals out to them. That seemed to work out okay, but this will be just one less step for somebody. It'll be a one call thing instead of having to call us and then having a referral to somebody else. So we think that lesson learned will really benefit us. Out on Beaver Island, we're doing all kinds of deliveries out there, even picking up mail at the post office for folks and delivering their mail to them. So it's a little bit different world out there on the island, and we've done a lot to make things work for them out there. Yeah.
Great. Hey, this is great. We've got a couple more questions we want to ask, but I know Scott's got to leave. Scott, is there anything else you wanted to say before you wrap up your participation here?
Besides saying thanks to everybody, there's a challenge out there for us that hasn't come up necessarily, but I think it ought to be on our radar screens, and I wanted to raise it. And that is how systems like the folks that are represented here as the leaders, how are we going to connect passengers to the vaccine distribution? At some point in time, God willing, a vaccine is going to be available, and it's going to need to be distributed widely. Folks like Charlevoix County Transit know exactly where the people in that county are who are transportation disadvantaged, are seniors, are people with disabilities who are going to need access to get that vaccine. I think about places like Flagstaff and Rochester, and Miguel's talking about a high, low-income populations. There is going to be, looking forward here, there's going to be a role for us in transit to make that work well. And I think an important one for us to establish in that new normal, our value. So I'll leave with that challenge and ask everybody here to think about that because I think it's going to be an important thing to get on all of our radar screens for 2021.
That's great. Thanks, Scott. I know I've heard the president say the military is going to be involved in distribution, but I know that it'll probably roll down if that's true to, local folks, right, to do the final mile delivery. Yep. So yeah, very good.
We've
Thanks,
seen it
Scott.
so many times. Yep. Thank you,
Yeah.
guys. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for being here. We've got about 10 more minutes, folks. We've got 2 more questions I want to ask our panelists, but I also want to ask Tim and Heather to share with us about, your one of the silver linings, which is the connection with other agencies in your community and how you see things going forward. Tim, can you share with us?
Sure. So we have a partnership with Albany Transit. Albany is a city just to our east, and it's a commuter service that is mostly used to transport students back and forth from the community college to the university. There's a dual enrollment. And we just didn't know how ridership was going to be at the start of the school year. And with the having to have the restrictions on the maximum number of people on the bus, we had a bus that we were able to provide as a standby bus. Luckily, we didn't have to put it into service, but we had a driver on standby. We had the bus on standby. And if we had needed that, we certainly didn't want to leave anybody behind on the first, second, third day of school. So we did that for the first week up until we realized that we weren't going to need it. The other thing we did as far as community partnerships, and I'm sure most agencies went through this, because the bus provides a rolling billboard, if you will, both on the inside and the outside, we got a lot of requests to put up ads and public service announcements, that kind of thing. And we're usually really strict about what goes on inside the buses or on our transit shelters. But if it was for the public good, then we were much more relaxed about allowing agencies to do that. And that was really helpful. That's a good way to disseminate information. And, we'll see moving forward after the pandemic eases. But I think while this was going on, it was a very helpful service.
That's great. Heather, how about you?
So, like, again, many of those speaking, we did a lot of the same partnerships. We looked at how can we connect people with their meals or their food boxes. We did actually deliver food boxes on behalf of the food bank here locally. We tried to do the grocery service. As Jill mentioned, one of our challenges is we have one chain in town that does pick up groceries. So that just really wasn't a viable option for us. I will say the silver lining for us, we participated in all the weekly calls with other partner agencies around our community and made those connections. But to hear public officials and Flagstaff say transit is essential, we call that a win. Transit oftentimes is the last thought at the table, and for us to be part of those conversations, for us, that's the silver lining that we're trying to build on now, is how do we continue getting the community and our public officials to see how transit serves. And I really like the challenge Scott just threw out there, because I think we can be part of that conversation. And again, just reinforce that transit's here and we serve a lot of people and we're important to these conversations. So for us, that's one of our biggest takeaways.
That's great. And I'll start the next question with you, Heather. So that you don't have to say like everybody else said, but you can be the first one on this one. Tell us about what have you learned and how will you change any processes or technology you might use to help future-proof your system? So in other words, I shared those top 10 things you can do, and like 7 or 8 of them were technology related. Have you come up with anything you're going to do differently?
So it's a couple of things we did right away. The barriers that we put in the buses, I will tell you, that's been a long time discussion in our community. We didn't want to put barriers in and separate our drivers from our riders. That was a customer service aspect we didn't want to lose. Our drivers didn't want to lose. So that was a low-tech solution that provided that security element, which Transit's been working on across the nation. But with technology, we were already working on development of mobile ticketing. We have a tap card system as well as a cash drop system here in Flagstaff, and started focusing on what do we do next with those. So we are ready to roll out online reloading for our tap cards, which we didn't have in place before COVID, and also a stored value card, which we think helps those that can't pay for that monthly pass up front have access to the same benefits of fare capping with those period passes. And then the other technology that we're really excited about is we have real-time arrival solution here in town. We have our own branded app we're taking it to the next step. We're going to be going out to bid and looking at coming up with a solution that does trip planning, that allows a rider to see how many bikes are on the bike rack, that allows a rider to see how many people are on the bus. And we're very excited about some of those technology changes because it really changes the conversation for some of our riders.
And you'll have enough money in your capital budget to do that, even with the COVID situation?
We do. We actually have a healthy capital budget right now that's going to allow us to do many of these things. Mhm.
That's excellent. Those are really good technological solutions, I think, to help future-proof your agency. Tim, how
Yes.
about you? We'll go backwards this time, and we'll have you speak next. What kind of technology, new technology you're looking at, or new processes that can help you future-proof?
Yeah, I know now why you let Heather go first, because we were probably working off the exact same script. Exactly what we're doing. We already had APCs, AVLs, tracking, real-time tracking, but we are also doing an upgrade, and we were going to do it anyways, but certainly the events have led us to quicken that pace. So we are going to get the very things that Heather talked about. We're going to get how many bikes are on the bus. It was brought up earlier. It's really convenient to have how many people are on the bus now, coming and going. And so that's exactly the kind of thing we're going to do. One other thing we're going to do is we're going to have the dynamic screens inside the buses that you see in bigger cities.
Yeah.
Getting out the information is part of our challenge. And if we have a dynamic screen that we can just put any sort of quick changes on the bus, and also down in our transit center, that's really going to help get out the information for people who may not have smartphones and a lot of technology available to them.
I think that's brilliant, Tim. Really good. Miguel, how about you in Rochester? What kind of new technology coming out of COVID are you thinking about? Take your, you're on mute, the favorite phrase of 2020. So yeah. There you go.
Yeah, and I always fail at it. Yeah, I think one of the things that COVID has really pushed us to look at is to go completely cashless for our paratransit service. So that's one of the technologies that we're looking at. So it's more on an invoice sort of system. And it's going to definitely change our processes for our paratransit. We are already offering, which has been a great help, because obviously imposing limits on our buses is very difficult. So we actually are already providing real-time boarding information to our customers, where they can make the decision on whether they want to board a bus or not based on how many people are on the bus or route that they're about to take. And I'd be willing to obviously share anything that people are interested in on how we have accomplished that. Put anyone in touch with our IT department. But again, that has been a great asset for our customers, where they appreciate the fact that they can tell, okay, it's half full, I'm not going to take it, or it's almost empty, so yeah, I'll take that bus. And then finally, I would say communication has been just not necessarily a hurdle, but obviously the importance of communication with our own employees has been critical during this time. How do we keep constant communication with them, advising them about what we're doing? So another project that we are probably going to accelerate is the creation of an app for our employees, so we can disseminate information and keep them updated as to what the company is doing and what they should know.
Those are great. Jill, how about you? Any new technology that you're thinking about implementing post-COVID here?
I'm always thinking about technology. That looking forward, I think, is something that we need to do. We have a scheduling and dispatching software that's fairly robust. At this point, with the number of rides that we're doing, it does a really good job. We've had this program since 2016, where we moved from what I would consider an entry level programs. So we're fortunate that we were able to upgrade back in 2016. That gave us the ability to have a web portal so folks could schedule their rides online. It gives us that online wallet so people can fund their own pay accounts. And we have the notification system, which has been really helpful to us so that we can shoot out messages back in March and April, especially as things were changing so rapidly. We were able to use that notification system to send out messages to not only the folks who were riding on a regular basis, but everybody that was in our database, and just say, hey, here's what Transit's doing. We haven't gone away just because of the pandemic, but yet, we've changed our hours or whatever our message was. And we used that several different times through March and April to get messages out widely to the community. And that's been real helpful. Looking forward, we're looking at more mobility on demand type service, and the software or apps that go along with that will integrate with our current software. So I'm actually working right now on the COVID FTA grant that is out here in Michigan. We have to have that information to our MDOT project managers by Friday. So fast and furious, I think we had about 7 business days to work on that. So we're looking at that. We've looked at some just mobile ticketing even to go away from our software company and do something different. Our sister organization that is a small little car ferry here in our county, it holds 4 cars and travels 1/8 of a mile across part of Lake Charlevoix, has been using a mobile ticketing app all summer, and it was a huge success for them. So we're looking at something like that. We're looking at using a local video photographer to do some PSA type things for us. I have a meeting with him actually tomorrow. So just different, anything that we can do to continue to get the word out about what we're doing, that we're still here, transit is still available, is where we're going, and technology is our friend. And as we continue to move forward, I'm always looking for the next piece of technology that's going to help our staff do their jobs better.
That's great. Thanks, Jill, Miguel, Tim, and Heather for being part of this second panel on our TripSpark CTAA CEO Roundtable on reimagining your transit system in a post-COVID world. Great information for those who are listening. Thank you, Tanya and Sebastian from TripSpark, for sharing with us some of the items that you have, that you're working on now, some of these technology items that we were just talking about how to future-proof us. I really think that technology is a way for mid and small size systems to kind of equalize themselves with the larger systems. You can have the same type of amenities like Tim was talking about that he wants to do in his system, providing this type of real-time information and handheld app devices and cards that swipe and pay and all the stuff that the major transit systems have. We now have the ability within our grasp at the mid-sized transit systems to offer to our passengers. I also want to thank Scott Bogren and L'Oreal Lance and the team at CTAA for helping us put this together, all the technical work behind the scenes. And I also want to offer to those who are still on the line that if I can be of any help, free of charge, I'm happy to drop in and do a presentation on this or several other topics. So your staff meeting, if you're interested in doing so, just shoot me an email at paul.comfort@trapezegroup.com. Again, thank you everyone for being with us today on this special CEO webinar. We wish you the very best. Stay safe out there. And we're looking for hopefully some new funding out of Washington before the end of this year to help our transit systems continue to make it to bridge the gap when we're back up to 80 to 90% of ridership. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.
Thanks, everybody.